everyone, Merry Christmas and welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. I am, as always, your host, Shane Lawrence, and this is Ed Stories Volume 2. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. Now, we all know whether we've been teaching for a week, a month, or a decade, there's some pretty wild stuff that happens in and out of the classroom, and on this special edition of Ed, 3 educators will be sharing some of their most memorable experiences from their own teaching life. First up, we're going to hear from Ramona Meharg.
So a couple years ago, we had a principal, and she was very old school and very hardcore, and she was lovely, but just very. It was her way or the highway,
Mm-hmm.
and she we have commencement every year, and I do the decorating of the gym for commencement. Our commencement is in June, and so we always have lots of flowers on the stage, and we can't afford to purchase these flowers, of course, so we borrowed them from a local nursery. And then what I would do is I would offer them up to they would tell me what they cost, and after commencement, if staff want to purchase them, then they could, and that makes the nursery happier to loan us these plants. And if we didn't sell them, then they would be taken back to the nursery. And so usually I would sell about half of them. So the principal had loved these 2 pots that were on the stage, and they were tall. They were like 3 or 4 feet tall, and then the plants, of course, stuck probably 3 feet above that yet. And she said, "Look, I don't have time to come get them. Here's my keys to my truck. Go put them in my truck." And it was a big SUV, a Chevy Suburban maybe.
Okay.
And so she says, "Throw them in the back, and then just bring me my keys back." So sure, no problem. So I run her truck around back to the gym, and I load these 2 big beasts of planters into the back of her truck. And I'm going to bring her truck back to where she normally parks out at the front of the school. And very carefully driving out, as I'm just going down onto the street, there's a little bit of a lip as you're coming out of the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, these 2 plants fire forward, like they're top heavy. So they just tip forward, and dirt flies out of these things. Like, it hits me on the back of the head. It is everywhere. Like, it's in the seats, it's on the dashboard, there's like dirt and pieces of plant. Like, it looks like the plants pretty much exploded inside this truck.
That's awesome.
And this is the last PD day before summer.
Yeah.
And all I'm thinking of as I stop this vehicle, is I teach in an old building, and we have a very dungeon-like basement where they used to have change rooms for the old gym, but now it's just creepy and full of spiders. And all I'm thinking is, oh my gosh, this woman's going to have me teaching in the basement next year when she sees this mess. Anyways, we're lucky we have a shop. So I took it to the shop, and my educational assistant, God bless him and I got the shop back out. We're vacuuming and we're cleaning, and we put everything back good as new. We go and we switch the planters around. Of course, I've got to take these busted things home now because I've destroyed them. Put 2 new ones in, put her car back, and she was none the wiser. And wow. I got away with it. However, when she retired 3 years later, I did finally confess to what I had done, and I was sure that she was going to find out and send me to the basement. But until I told her, she didn't have a clue that I had almost destroyed her vehicle.
That is fantastic. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
I can still feel the plants pelting me on the back of the head.
This episode is brought to you by ATB. And at this time of year, maybe you're out playing hockey or watching hockey. Hockey is a team effort, and ATB wants to be a part of your team. From Tom Thumb and Pee Wee all the way up to the pros, ATB helps sponsor teams across Alberta. So whether you're on the ice or on the bleachers, ATB can help make hockey possible. All right, let's get to our next story from Caterina Rylance.
So actually, I was just thinking about this. So talking about the cultural center and new people coming to Canada, we have some new families that have just immigrated from Mexico, so they're Spanish speaking. Mm-hmm. And so I know some Spanish, but communicating fluently on a level that they need to be supported in was hard for me. So we've been using Google Translate conversations. So essentially what happens is you press a button, you talk into it, and then it translates it into Spanish, kind of verbally. And I was working with some kids the other day, and I was trying to communicate to them what they needed to do for an assignment. And the Google tool was not working to our benefit. It was hilarious. We probably spent an hour just sitting in this cultural center laughing at each other, trying to use this tool. And after that day, I thought to myself, okay, so I could write about this on surviving teaching, but I don't even know how I would articulate it, right? I was talking into an iPad and laughing, and they had I was trying to communicate stuff about how they needed to write out sentences about themselves in a to myself letter, and it was talking about sofas and furniture to them. So it's kind of just one of those examples that we do our best as teachers, but there's no kind of path or no prescribed method that it's going to work. And even when it does, sometimes you just got to make the best of it and make it into a good moment. So that was kind of the story that I kind of thought about.
I love that. I mean, the technology thing is always fun like that. I mean, it reminds me of when I was on a mission trip with some kids from our church. This is a long time ago, and there was some girl trying to tell she was just chatting with some guys, like just, in Mexico City, and she was trying to tell them that she was embarrassed, and she wound up instead saying that she was pregnant. Because I think the word is embarazado or something like that. It's like very So she just tried to sort of Spanishize embarrassed, and oops. Then she really was embarrassed.
That's hilarious. I feel like that's exactly what's happening with us. I was trying to be so serious and trying to help them, and then it was coming across like, okay, crazy lady across from the table, we don't know what you're saying. It was great.
Our last story comes from Emily Langerholc. Hang on to your hats. It's kind of weird.
The strangest thing that I was just talking about this last week. The strangest thing that I've ever heard of happen, maybe not the strangest, but one of the strangest things that I've ever heard of happen in a band room happened to me at the end of my first year of teaching. It'd been a rough year. I felt a little banged up, your typical first year teacher, this and that, other things that happened personally that it made me feel a little bit more banged up than usual. But it's the end of the year. It's a week before our concert. I'm just like, we need to just do this end of the year concert and get it over with. And it's a week before, and I go to open the door, and one of my students is already there when I get there. Typical. But she's already in the hallway when I get there, and she goes, "Miss, you do not want to open that door." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, we have a week to the concert. I'm not going to open the door to my room. Good God. And she was right, because I put my key in and I opened the door, and there were, I'll never get the image out of my brain, but I'm trying to imagine anybody else having a real time envisioning this. There were termite wings, and they just flew up from the floor like pixie dust. Like they were like wings from termites, apparently. And I just gotten corrected on this. Apparently what happened is they do like this whole like mating ritual or whatever thing, and they swarm like wherever they go. No, they didn't eat anything. There's no evidence for the next like 6 years after I was there that they ate anything, but they swarmed, and apparently they made it. And apparently when that happens, you get like anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 of like the dudes like losing their termite wings. And they left them all over my floor in my band room a week before my first ever spring concert. And I walk in and I'm like,
oh my gosh,
what do you do? Did they eat anything? I didn't eat anything. Like I think I would have handled it better now. But I think I handle things better now, and now that I went through that experience when I was younger. And I'm just looking in there. I'm like, it was like my brain couldn't process it for a while. So I was like, okay. But, in very like musician type, the show must go on kind of ways. Mm-hmm. We hightailed it to the stage and rehearsed out there for the week. And at some point, my old head custodian, there's one of the best people I've ever met. And I just sat down like a folding chair that somebody put out there, and I just cried. I just cried for like 10 minutes, and he was like, "Whoa." Like, he didn't expect that from me, I guess. But it was just like too much to deal with at the moment. And I just sat down and cried. I'm like, just give me 10 minutes and then I'll be okay. And I was okay emotionally the rest of the day. I had two assistant principals at the time who both went on to be like principals, very like high achieving, very super awesome at their jobs. Both very like natty dressers and very like, both the gentleman and the lady were very like into their appearances and stuff. And so they took literally 2 steps in the room and then they like high kneed it, ran out of the room. They were like, they were so freaked out they like couldn't deal with it. But I couldn't understand. And I odd thing is, gentleman I was dating at the time was an entomologist, like he was a grad student in entomology. So I would ask him all these. I'm like, why is this happening to me? He's like, leave me alone. I got stuff to do. I'm like, just bothering him all day. Like, what is going on?
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it was like the strangest. I've never seen anything like that since. I hopefully will never have to see that again, because it was like such a mess you can't even imagine. But like, how do you explain that to like parents and stuff like that?
This episode of Ed was also brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. You know that Ed is a member of the Alberta Podcast Network, but there's a lot of other shows as well, like the Tight Ends Podcast. I got the pleasure of being on this show just recently. You can go look it up at tightendspodcast.com. It's a sports podcast for people who maybe aren't necessarily super into sports, kind of like me. I had a great time on the show. It's a great conversation every week, all about what's happening in the world of sports. Again, you can check that out at tightendspodcast.com or find it on albertapodcastnetwork.com. And if you want to get in touch, you want to be a guest on this show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you want to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podme.com, or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcatcher of your choice. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed can also be heard on Voice Ed Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself and all of our storytellers today, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.